R.T. Rybak began serving as he's currently the executive director of Generation Next, which is a collaborative effort among many community partners here in the metropolitan area and across the state. He assumed that role directly following his mayoral stint in January of 2014. He served as mayor of Minneapolis from 2002 to 2013. During his tenure as mayor, Rybak led efforts to make Minneapolis the national leader in innovative cradle-to-career approaches to youth development, and has worked to highlight the crisis of our region's achievement gap and advanced effective strategies for ending it. As mayor, he founded the Minneapolis Promise, an innovative cluster of coordinated efforts to get students college and career ready and to put them on the path of success. The Minneapolis Promise put career centers in every Minneapolis high school and gave 18,000 students step-up summer jobs. Please join me in welcoming former Mayor R.T. Rybak.
Good afternoon. Are you guys ready for this? I am incredibly excited to be here today. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here. And Dean, thank you especially for the invitation. You should know how incredibly important the Dean is right now and the work that's taking place around this community to make sure every child has a great opportunity. And many, many, many leaders who you see up here are part of that work. I think I'm on the phone with Michael Rodriguez about every other day, but you give a round of applause for the incredible faculty up here who've done great work. Thank you all so much. I don't get to do this too often, so let's try this, folks. Okay, smile now. Give a wave. All right, congratulations, guys. Well, one of the things that I wanted to do was to allow you to imagine yourself as mayor, and you get to do some pretty wonderful things when you're mayor, but I actually had the privilege of doing one thing that I loved more than anything else. One of the real great joys that I had during my time as mayor was the privilege of speaking to every ninth grade in every Minneapolis school for the last 9 years that I was mayor. I spoke to an assembly in every single high school. And I looked out on those audiences, and I recognized a couple things in them. They spoke 100 languages. They came from literally all over the world, and they represented an incredibly diverse group of people. And there were some people who looked at those students and said that their diversity created tremendous challenges. And they were right. But when I looked at those students, I saw something very, very different. I looked out at those people with those languages and those cultures and recognized the fact that not one of us in that room could look across the room and assume that everyone was the same. The diversity of the students in our schools today is not a deficit, is the single greatest asset we have. In a global economy where we must cross barriers, in a world torn apart by war, we need to be different and together, being different and together at once. But as I looked out on those students, I knew we needed to give them something. And there's very little you can give in a short speech, even as a mayor talking to a class. But I knew that one of the most important things we needed to do was to have them believe in themselves, have them get some sense of resiliency, the ability to stand up and move over a boundary. And so I came up with a little exercise that I did every time I was there. I asked them to imagine that there was a breeze in the room, blowing in one ear and out the other, and with it took every thought in their brain. And when their brains were totally clear, I asked them to close their eyes and imagine them being that one big thing they wanted to do when they got older. Not what their teacher wanted them to do, not what the person next to them wanted to do, but deep, deep in their heart. What was that they really, really wanted to do? And keeping their eyes closed, I asked them to see themselves doing that. And they weren't just good at it. They were the very best there ever was. No one had ever done that better than they did. And as their eyes were closed, I asked them to do one more thing. While they did that one big thing, better than anyone else in the world, I wanted them to imagine one adult coming into that picture. Someone they could trust, someone they could believe in, someone who would somehow help them get to become that one big thing. And as I looked out on them and hoped that their visions were getting bigger and hoped they were building that resilience, I knew that last part, That part about the trusted adult in their life may well be the most important part. You're now far more expert in educational psychology and strategy or many of the other things than I will ever be, but I do know one thing. For people to be successful in this world, we know it's a dramatically easier path if there is one trusted adult in their life. And the beautiful thing is, over the 12 years that I got to be mayor, I got to go around the city and hear remarkable stories about individuals, just one person, playing an enormous role in someone's life. I remember a young Somali woman who told me the story about coming to this community and somehow getting into a situation where she was an indentured servant doing work in another home, but they allowed her to go to Roosevelt High School. And she was befriended by the librarian. She told the librarian her story. The librarian welcomed the young lady into her home, got her into college, and now that young woman is a journalist because of one trusted adult in her life. I remember one family. They lived in the Phillips neighborhood. They had the only air conditioner on the block, and on a hot spring afternoon, they turned it on and said to the kids in the neighborhood, "Come into our house so you can do your homework." And it went so well, they did it the next day and the next day. And now, many years later, it turned into a large foundation that's helped thousands of kids because they began with the gift of being that one trusted adult in a life. And it doesn't always have to be an enormous thing. One story I heard from a woman was about when she was younger and she was painfully shy. And she sat on the bus alone every single day as she came home from school. But every day the bus driver looked her in the eye and said hello. Every time she got on the bus, every time she got off the bus, she never had the courage to say hello back. But finally one day, something broke through. That warm smile, that sense of hello, she said hello back to the driver. And somehow it gave her the courage to sit in a seat next to a stranger for a young girl who wound up her best friend. Small acts, random acts of kindness where one adult becomes a trusted adult in someone's life. Ask yourself who that is in your life. For me, it was a guy named Steve Kingsbury, my 8th grade social sciences teacher. I was a terrible student. I was a behavior problem. I was very used to getting a paper back from a teacher that was marked up with all sorts of red ink and a terrible grade, and I did that again when I turned the paper in to Mr. Kingsbury. But I walked to the front of his class, and I picked up my paper, and the first time in my academic career, there was an A on the front. And he looked me in the eye and said something very simple. He said to me, "You have something to say." Decades later, standing here today, I remember that like it was a moment ago. It has never left my life, and I literally would not be standing here today had Stephen Kingsbury not been willing to be that trusted adult in my life. Now, every adult, at some point in their life gets the opportunity to be a trusted adult, but you are special. You are special because you are leaving nothing to chance. You have intentionally chosen careers, each of you in your different ways, teachers and superintendents and coaches and educational psychologists and family therapists. You have chosen intentionally to make it your life's work to be about being a trusted adult in someone's life. You alone. And there will be thousands of university students who will graduate in this cycle, but no students, more than the ones that we are looking at right now, no students are more likely to play a role in these young people's lives than you. Not just one, not just two, not just because you have a great heart, impacting many people and impacting them with the collected knowledge of the people here today and your fellow students. You are going out in the world with the incredible gift of being able to hold a generation in your hand. That is not a small task, and I look at you and I know you are up to the task. But as you do that, there's no formula for how to be a trusted adult. I only ask you to think about a couple very brief things. The first that I ask you is to recognize the fact that the opportunity to be that trusted adult may come only once. It may be fleeting. It may be a door of opportunity that opens only for a split second, and if you don't move into it, you cannot ever play that role. What that means is that in your work, in any of those jobs you choose, we ask you to simply be present, to be aware at any moment for that opening. And that means that you'll be tired. That means that you'll be distracted. That means some days you just frankly don't care as much. You don't have the luxury of letting down your guard, because at any moment, you could be the one who stepped into that life. You can't schedule a 15-minute conversation in which conveniently Jenny or Jamal's life, entire arc of it, can change. You have to be present in the work. The second thing to remember is you will be going out to try to be a trusted adult in one of the most diverse generations we have ever raised, probably the most we have ever raised, and in most quarters by a lot. That means many things. It means you'll be crossing barriers of language and culture, things that are very unfamiliar to you. What it means also is that you're going to have to find a young life and find a way to help build a bridge into a new world for them. But I ask you to do that humbly enough to recognize that there is also an enormous gift of allowing them to build a bridge into their life. In this remarkably diverse new world that we're part of, we all have a tremendous amount to learn from each other. The final point I want you to remember is that you are dealing with these young people in a world that is filled with some really, really rotten news out there. Let's face it, folks. I mean, stop and think about it. The world is torn apart by war and chaos. The climate is melting down. We have these massive education gaps that I'm dealing with. The Twins can't put together a winning season. I mean, we had this winter. I mean, think about it. This is not a world that is necessarily set up for optimism. And yet, I hope you remember that one of the gifts of these beautiful young brains is its purity. Be very, very careful not to fill them with the wonderful wisdom and cynicism that we develop over many, many years of time. One of the gifts of youth is also the gift of possibility. As we get older, our eyesight goes, but so does our vision. It's harder to see that opportunity on the horizon. Even those of you who consider yourselves young will recognize far too soon that what looks like something new may also begin to seem like something scary. Frankly, that's your problem and not the problem of these young kids. These young minds are going to see opportunities on the horizon far beyond anything we can see. Allow them to go. And in case you don't believe what an incredible role that you are going to play, I ask you to do a version of what I asked those young kids to do. I ask you now to close your own eyes. And for those of you who were out celebrating last night, this should be easier. But I want you all, if you could, to finish by closing your eyes and being as still as you possibly can. There is a breeze blowing through this room, and it's blowing in one ear and out the other. And as every thought leaves your brain, I want you to think about that one trusted adult in your life who helped you get to this point. Keeping your eyes closed, remember what they said. Remember the look in their eyes. Remember them sending you on your way. And your eyes are closed. I want you to reach out a hand and thank them. And then grab the other hand and reach back for a smaller hand whose face you won't yet know. And remember that you are about to set forth on a path that will find not just one of those hands, but many. And your job is to hold them tight, to bring them forward, to look them in the eye, to give them that same advice. And now you can open your eyes because you don't have to imagine. You've chosen this as your life work. And on those days when you're tired, on those days when you hate your boss or you hate your job or you hate your world and you're asked over the dinner table, what did you do today? You have the gift of being able to say, I changed a life again. What a gift. And what a gift that you've all chosen to do this work. Best of luck to all of you. We need you.